Hey horror fans, Bored now, back with Rachel McDonald. On this video we will be talking about a recent horror release, a recent Shudder original. It got a small cinema release, I think maybe for about a week, and then it went straight on to Shudder. So it's a low budget Canadian movie, and we think you say the title Skinamarink, something like that anyway, and it's a debut movie. The setup for the film is quite simple. The premise is then you've got a couple of kids, like a brother and sister. They wake up in the middle of the night to find out that their dad is missing, and that mysteriously all the windows and doors have vanished from the house. And that becomes you see the night from their point of view and the mystery of what exactly is going on, and they start to realize that there is another presence in their house. An experimental documentary style feel. One thing it does is it throws you straight into the story. Like there's no really intro to it where you set up the characters. Like, Rachel, what did you think of Skinamarink?
So, look, I'll acknowledge that this movie is trying something new and it's experimental, and I can always applaud that. But I didn't like this film. I didn't think it worked, and I'll say this now, and we can expand on it as we discuss the film. I actually think this film would have worked better as a short film, like a short, maybe 15 to 20-minute film, because I do think that there were parts of it that were effective, but there was so much in between that for me just dragged the film down. And the experimental way that they were filming it and the way that they were using the cinematography and the sound, it just didn't jive with me. It wasn't really working for me. So while I wouldn't say it was a bad film, because it's definitely interesting, and I think they definitely are trying some things. And as I was watching it, I was actually thinking this is one of the reasons that I actually do like streaming services, is it gives filmmakers like this a platform that where they might not be able to, get a cinematic release or only have a short one. You can at least get it out on platforms like Shudder and things like that. But no, for me, it didn't really work, and I didn't really enjoy it, even though there's a lot that we can talk about. It wasn't for me. What about you?
She start life out as a short film. I'm pretty sure I read that, so that's
okay.
And that's probably a complaint I have. I think maybe it could have been shorter. For the sort of film it is, 100 minutes maybe is a bit long for this sort of film. For me, it got better as it went on. When things started happening, it got better, and there was some really good horror stuff later on in the film. Funny one for me. It was quite a hard one to really judge and talk about what exactly it is and how it's done. So I did enjoy that. Well, enjoy is maybe the wrong word, but I liked the film quite a bit. I liked how unique it was, how distinct it was. I think they came up with some really inventive horror sort of tricks, and just some stuff which did fall into surreal type territory, like objects randomly disappearing. And I think because so much of it was in pitch black, and you were following the characters around, and it was from their POV sort of thing, so just something about the way you're looking into dark corners and dark rooms, and it just makes the mind wonder what exactly is in those darkness, those spaces, and it means that you can have a creepy moment where if something moves even slightly, it can freak you out. It's sort of funny the film is actually set in 95. I'm not quite sure why it's set in the past or in that. I mean, part of it they might, because they have the use of these Lego bricks, and that maybe means that it feels appropriate, in 95. Because if it was a modern set film, I don't think kids really play with those anymore.
No,
not as much anyway. But part of it could just be then it's quite nostalgic. I think the way it uses that cartoon that it keeps playing. Because that's a really interesting cartoon, because I was trying to figure out what it was, At first, I thought it could be Dumbo, but then I realised it wasn't. And to be fair, with the budget of this movie, I think they would have blown it if they had to pay.
Yeah, it'd be something in the public domain. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the film quite a lot. I would agree it probably was overlong, but I would also say I did get more into it as it went on, and I think that is a good sign. I did find it, because for a while I did wonder if it was just going to be this thing where, okay, it's super arty, and it, sometimes that can be quite distracting, like how arty it is, and like, am I really going to get swept up in it? A bit of a struggle for me.
Yeah.
As I said, because it improved as it went on, that was a thing, and it like built on the mystery and suspense of it. Because another detail which is quite interesting, which I think they did it to make it feel authentic, is then they actually put the title sequence at the start of the movie, not the end. And then the end of the movie, it literally just ends. And I think that's just for like shock value, and just, it's almost like it goes dead and that's the end of it.
And that's it, yeah.
So it's almost like they sort of thought it would break the illusion a bit if you had like end credits type things.
Yeah.
So interesting, then they had them at the start. And
that was a good choice, I think, having the credits at the beginning, because like you said, then at the end you're just left kind of done and unsettled, and it doesn't break anything. I think I read a lot of people are saying, like, because I went and read some reviews, and I watched some YouTubers that I follow who do horror reviews, and a lot of people are talking about how this film made them feel like they were a kid again, like it gave you that perspective of being a kid alone in the house. And once I read that and was like, oh, okay, so I can kind of see what they were trying to do there. Like I said, it didn't, I think it was the camera work that just wasn't working for me. The fact that I mean, I know it was supposed to be told from the kid's point of view, but it felt a lot of the time like we were watching a movie without any characters. And I was like, I need something to grab onto. I need something to care about here. And we didn't really get to see the kids that well. And again, I understand that we're trying to be experimental and we're trying for a different approach to horror, and we're looking for more atmosphere and things like that. But it just, for me, it just wasn't working. I mean, there were so many camera angles where it was like, what am I even looking at? Which I guess was kind of the point. But because the movie wasn't pulling me in, I wasn't then getting engaged in those kinds of shots, and I wasn't able to maybe fully appreciate them because it just wasn't holding my interest, this film. I found myself kind of zooming in and out a lot. I can't really put my finger on why it wasn't capturing me, but it just wasn't holding my interest as much as I was watching it.
It is such a niche film, then. Yeah. It's the sort of film I can't really fault people if they don't like it, because it does come down to a taste thing. And, I don't always like films like this. I've criticised films that I feel are being a bit too arty, or like there's just not enough of a point, or it's just like just a taste thing that is not really working for me. Yeah. And there were bits of this, especially early on, I thought might be like that. I was saying in this the other night, I did... When I was at college, I did take an experimental film class, and so I did see some films that maybe are made in a similar way to this, and some were legitimately good, and some I thought were like pretentious crap, basically. Yeah. But there was a mix. So, and maybe someone like Lynch, some of his style you can see in some of this a little bit as well, but. And especially when he's gone like super low budget. Paranormal Activity comparison, that is something that's sprung to. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, people do forget with the first one of those movies, it does have a very like documentary style feel. Very low budget. You do get a lot of scenes where it is the camera wandering about the house, and it's the suggestion of something happening. It might happen, it might not. Well, it would work better as a short film, because for me it was the in-between bits that were really starting to drag. And I understand, again, we want to build tension, but there's building tension and then there's losing your audience. And so I found when things like
there's a scene maybe about a quarter of the way through the film, I can't quite remember about, where the girl, so there's a girl and a boy, the siblings, and the girl goes upstairs and thinks that she sees her father, and then she thinks that she sees her mother sitting on the edge of the bed, and the mother's talking to her and saying, close your eyes, and then it goes like pitch black, and you hear the mother like moaning in pain, and you hear like these breaking noises, which almost sound like bones breaking. Like, I think moments like that I thought were really effective. And I think moments like that is where the camera work really worked very well. The fact that we couldn't see what was happening, but we could just hear like these cracks and this pain. And, again, there was a scene later on where the boy came downstairs and saw the girl and something had happened to her. And so I think those moments worked really well. The voices, when they'd hear the voices calling to them and saying, oh, come upstairs, or we want to play and stuff like that. Like, that was definitely eerie and very creepy. But I think you could condense this film down to a short half-an-hour film, and it would be that much more effective as a short film, because I think all those long stretches in between where I was getting lost and where I think a lot of people would get lost, if you cut those down and made it a little bit tighter and a little bit, just a little bit shorter, then it would have worked. Even just an hour, even an hour-long film, if you just chopped half an hour off this film, I do think it went for too long, and it stretched out some of the events a little bit too far. Because, like I said, I kept going a bit in and out of the film because it just wasn't holding my interest. But then something like that would happen. The voice would start to talk, or you'd hear, the mother and the bone snapping, and you'd be brought back into the movie. But then I'd leave it again. I want a movie that's going to grab me and where I'm going to be engaged the whole time. And I just wasn't with this one. So that's why I think it would have worked better as a short film. And I had a look at some reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, and I saw a few people were saying that too, that it would work better as a short film. And I was like, okay, so it's not just me that thinks this. So that does seem to be a bit of an opinion that's springing up.
Shudder have their own reviews, people reviewing it. And you couldn't get, like, the two extremes were just crazy. It's like, because there were quite a few giving it 5 stars, but then there were people giving it like 2 or just the 1. And it's just the extremes, because like someone in his review or her review says it's the scariest movie like ever, and that's extreme. And it's sort of like, when you've only watched it once and it's a new film, I don't think you can make that sort of snap judgment. And that's probably the thing, is like, this is the sort of film I would definitely watch it again, but I don't see myself rewatching it countless times. It is not going to be like a classic like Halloween or certain other, but then at the other scale, and it might have been similar to the way we struggled a bit in the early part of the film. Like someone says, I watched the first 35 minutes and turned it off, and like, but then you had extreme stuff like that saying, then it was like total rubbish, which I don't think is true neither. Some of it could just be because they wanted that experience of these kids over one night. So like maybe that's why they extended it. Another thing I was going to say is then it's also very non-linear, isn't it? Even though it has a documentary feel in some ways, most documentaries, it has a linear sort of...
Yes.
I mean, they jump about quite a bit because you get different perspectives, but normally they are sort of told as a story. This wasn't really told as a story. This had this thing where you did, like, it would go along and then it would cut to a different part of the scene, or it would... And it was sort of interesting the way it used sound and the way it was... I would say it was very voyeuristic, because at times it's like you were in the background and it was on your POV, like from your POV, and just stuff like when it had stuff on the TV and it's like you were in the background, like eavesdropping on that. Like, it's not like you were like really in the room and close up.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something the end of the film is doing, like literally the end, where it seems like the demon character, well, demon / mother, we can get into that. Very end of the film, like, it's almost like the demon's talking to you, because like she's staring at you in the dark.
Yes. asking what is your name, and that
Yeah.
part was creepy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that was purposely like turning the camera on you type thing,
Yeah.
and yeah, a lot of like the voices, like the children's voice, the way they did that. I think because it's in the dark and they're trying to be quite quiet, and once again they're playing with like innocent childlike voices, making that quite
Yes.
creepy, and the demonic
Yeah.
voice. I know it's a little bit cliche to use demonic voices, but that was very creepy as well.
I think it worked. I think it worked in this film because of the lack of sound. So it was very jarring and just kind of, very impactful and came out of nowhere. No, I think the voices were quite good. And yeah, just the scenes where you could feel that there was a presence there. Obviously that scene towards the end where he says to the kid, "Put the knife in your eye," and then you just hear the kid screaming like that. That quite upset me quite a bit. I was like, oh God, no, I didn't come in to hear kids mutilate themselves.
That was disturbing, yeah.
That was very disturbing. And that's what I'm talking about. Like these little moments I think were quite effective, but they just really lost me with a lot of the other stuff. I mean, it's very, very experimental filmmaking. I haven't seen really another film that's really like this. Very interesting sound design, and that's why I won't come out right and say, oh no, this is a bad film, because it's not a bad film. It's just not a film for everyone. And obviously the horror genre in particular can get very experimental, and we've seen that a lot in recent years. People trying new things, trying to see what scares people, trying to find new ways to scare audiences. And yeah, for some people who this kind of style works for, I imagine this film could have been very engaging and very scary. But I remember seeing like some of the reviews, someone said this is going to be one of those films where it's going to get like a ton of like 5 stars and a ton of 0 stars. Like it's one of those films that it's going to be very polarizing because it is so experimental. And like I said, I can applaud the directors and the writers and everyone who was working on the film for what they were trying to achieve, and I can appreciate it from like a filmmaker point of view. It was just not for me, and it just didn't engage me at all. And some of the reviews that I watched, I was like, okay, yeah, I can understand the point you're making, and I can understand how you can see this, but I don't know that I would rewatch this film. Maybe if I did, it would be different, but I don't know that it's one that I would want to rewatch. So just a very different, very interesting kind of movie, and I think it's good that these types of movies are getting made, but they're definitely not for everyone, and this one just wasn't for me.
Film, I think it might get lost if it wasn't for it being on the streaming service.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a result, I think it has created quite a bit of buzz where there's quite a lot of people talking about this movie, and I don't think that would happen if it just got seen by less people. If it got, like, say, just a very small cinema release, like very small Arthouse cinemas, realistically, not that many people are going to see it that way, and so it definitely has a bit more of a presence than some similar films have in the past, like, so. That's definitely a positive. It's sometimes you need to find the best home for this sort of film, and maybe on streaming that is the best home for it. This was calling them upstairs, or the Last Boy, because there's a really freaky thing where the girl has her mouth taken away because she's like talking back, and the voice is calling the other kid upstairs. I actually heard 2 voices, so I got. It sounded that way. I don't know if it's just because it was very demonic, but I did think, well, is this the mother's voice along with the demon's voice?
That's interesting. Guess as to what is happening in the house is that there is obviously some sort of malevolent entity in the house that is messing with them, whether we think it's a demon or a ghost or a malevolent spirit. But there was a very interesting line earlier in the movie where the boy asks the girl, he says, "Where's Daddy?" And she says, "Maybe he's gone where Mummy is, or maybe he's gone with Mummy." And then she says, "I don't want to talk about Mummy." So I'm wondering if, like, this is not something that's new. Like, maybe something like this has happened before and their mother disappeared, like, in the house, and they've just been waiting for their father to disappear. Because that whole "he's with Mummy, I don't want to talk about Mummy," and then when she hears her mother, like, trapped in the house, it could be it could be a bit of a rose red thing. Like the parents are still in the house somewhere. The kids just can't see them or get to them, or the demons are holding them or something like that. But my theory is that this house was already undertaken. Also, I think at the beginning, the boy, again, and this was another issue I had with the film, because of the way it was filmed, you couldn't always tell what was going on screen. Sometimes it was like, what's actually happening? And then you'd have to listen for the dialogue. So I think at the beginning, the boy injures himself and they take him to the hospital, to the doctor, because you hear the father on the phone and he's all like, no, nothing was broken. He was sleepwalking. But the way he's talking, it sounds like this has maybe happened before. Like maybe they're used to this. Like, weird occurrences have been happening in this house, and this is actually what we're seeing is like just the pin, like the culmination, the climax of what would be like a normal haunted house film, you know, like say this is like if you just watched Poltergeist, but all you watched was like the mother coming back from hell at the end. Like this is like, you know, the end of the haunting, and we're just being dropped in right at the very end when it's finally going after the kids. What was your theory about what was going on? What were you thinking?
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. There's a couple of things I don't think of there, and to the conclusion that the mother was possessed, or that she was the villain outright, but probably more likely she was possessed.
Yeah.
I think there's something about the way she was talking in that scene, then she was under a trance, and also just instructing them to close their eyes, like that got it. There's no like logical reason why she would do that. No. So it seemed like it was a hypnotic type thing where she wanted her vulnerable. It was the boy, wasn't it, at that point? I think. No, it was the girl, because then she took away her mouth. So I think that's partly what was going on then, and that's another reason the film is pretty creepy, because there's the sense of these children being controlled and they're being manipulated to do these things. So because of that scene, because of her telling her to close her eyes, then that made me think it was the mother who was the demon. About the father, because obviously the part of the mystery of the film was where did the dad go?
Yeah.
So I think what could have happened is that maybe the mother had been dead for years, and that it was sort of the father as a single parent. So the way I read it is almost then this could be the mother returning to watch over her children. Like this is her way of looking after them, watching over them, and but because it's a demonic thing, because she's being controlled, then she's actually hurting them, you know, she's doing harm to them. But then this is the idea of it's someone watching over them. Unlikely the father's been killed off somehow. So I sort of figured maybe the demon / mother had done that just because she wanted the children to themselves. True. And it's also maybe just this idea then the father has now gone to the same place as the mother, so they can both watch over them. So
and then and then the end of the film implies that the kids are still trapped in the house, because, you know, it says like 575 days later, and you still hear the son in the house, and the toys are still there in the house. So I mean, we don't know if someone else has moved into the house, or if we're suddenly seeing like maybe this is a different dimension, or this is some part of the house that they can't get to. But the kid definitely still seems trapped there, and trapped there as a child. So I'm thinking that somehow this family, has been trapped in this house in like a parallel dimension or something like that. The demon has taken them, so that they're now like trapped in this limbo, in this, or what we could be watching could be them in limbo. It could already be them trapped in this place, and this is just the loop that they're stuck on, you know, kind of like we were just talking about loops in our last video. So it could just be that they're in purgatory, and they're just maybe the whole family is dead, and this is their afterlife. There's a lot of different ways that this could go, and that's probably, I think, the most interesting aspect of this movie is the fact that we don't have answers. And I mean, they always say what you imagine is always 10 times scarier than anything that can be put on screen. So if you have an active imagination and you're watching a film like
absolutely.
this, can definitely get carried away and run away with you. So yeah, so it's definitely an interesting aspect to try and figure out what exactly is going on and what's happening to these kids, what's happened to their parents. Are they all just trapped? Are they all dead? It is very interesting to ponder.
In the house, it's just a reality that's not attached to the outside world.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, maybe it's almost like a ghost style house where it's not like, it's either not really happening or it's only happening in the house.
In
like,
that
it's
house,
almost
yeah.
like if they stepped outside, they would probably go back to normal, maybe.
And that
But
could be why all the doors and windows have disappeared, to trap them in this place, you know?
yeah, and there was something about the way we cut to the outside of the house at some point, and we just saw it, all the lights going off inside, and yeah, it just had a very otherworldly sort of feel where,
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely lots of ideas. So I think that's definitely an interesting part of the film and a good way to discuss it. So yeah, I think that's might be why I might watch it again, because I might pick up on something new then makes me to change my mind. But it definitely benefits from not giving you clear answers either way. Like that, there is a number of different readings you can have on this movie.
Yeah.
So that's good stuff. So yeah, okay, that's Skinamarink, which is on Shudder now. Nice and easy for you to check out if you fancy it. And you can obviously add to the discussion. So it's actually a regardless of where you come down on it, it's a tough movie to rate. So what would you rate it?
Look, I didn't enjoy this film like really much at all because it just wasn't my style, but I can acknowledge that it is at least trying something new. So I think I'll just go straight down the middle and just give it a 5 out of 10. And I'm giving it that because I can appreciate the experimental aspect. I think that some of the horror did work, and anytime someone tries something new in film, I think it's a good idea, you know, because film is so experimental and there's so many different things you can do with it, and especially within the horror genre. So I do have to respect when something has been tried, even if it isn't for me. So I'll go 5 out of 10 so that I can say that I can acknowledge that it's not a bad film, it just wasn't the film for me.
Yeah, well, okay. So because this is a first time watch for me, I'm going to go 7.5 because I really like the way it was made, and it was genuinely very creepy and scary when I really got into it. And I like that there's lots to discuss. I like that there's different theories you can put on it. I think that makes it a better film alone. But because it's a first time watch, and because I feel it could be a bit shorter like you, then yeah, I'm not quite going to go as high as an 8. So yeah, I will rewatch it, but for now I think 7.5 is where I land. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Support me on Patreon, patreon.com/borednow. That's just $1 a month to get some extra perks. And yeah, follow my TV reviews as well. I'm doing Yellow Jackets at the moment, the first season. That's ahead of season 2, which is coming next month. I'm also doing The Last of Us. Me and Rachel recently did our Buffy season 3 video, a big long discussion on that. So you can find that up on the channel now if you're a Buffy fan. And we also do other horror movies. We do franchises. And probably a notable one, because we've got the 6th movie coming up, is the Scream franchise. So we've done all 5 previous Scream movies, and we will be doing part 6 when it comes out in early March. So not too long to wait now. So yeah, if you're a Scream fan and you haven't checked out those reviews, do check out our reviews of the Scream franchise. Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, you can follow me, Rachel McDonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. I do have some horror content, as Keith mentioned, Buffy. I've also got Buffy content on there too. My Tumblr is also linked through my YouTube. So come and follow me everywhere. Keith usually leaves a link in the description for you guys to find me.
Okay, thanks guys. Take care. Keep watching horror movies, and we'll see you next time. Bye.